Okay. Have you ever asked someone for advice and then you have either completely ignored it or done the opposite, even when someone tells you something that is so true, so wise, so painfully obvious that you feel it in your entire body? You nod, you agree, you probably say you're right, and then of course you either ignore it or do the opposite, and then nothing changes. And it's so easy to shame yourself in that moment to think, oh my God, what is wrong with me? Why can't I just listen and incorporate what they said? But the more we learn about the human brain, the more we understand something radical. Ignoring advice is not a moral failure, it's a predictable biological response. Your brain isn't designed for growth, your brain is designed for survival. And survival has nothing to do with good advice. Survival depends on keeping your identity, aka the familiar, intact. So today, we are diving into the real science of why we resist advice, even when we know it could change our lives. And hopefully, once you understand this, you'll finally understand yourself. So here's why advice actually feels dangerous to your brain. If you've ever actually felt defensive when someone offered you advice, even gentle advice, you're not crazy. Your brain genuinely interprets advice as a threat. And there's this study out of UCLA by Matthew Lieberman where researchers put volunteers in an fMRI scanner and gave them feedback that challenged their self view. And here's what happened: their amygdala, aka the threat detection part of their brain, lit up. Lit up! Not metaphorically, not emotionally, but neurologically. Meanwhile, the prefrontal cortex, that part of their brain that is responsible for logic, decision making, and planning, went completely quiet. And if you think about that, the moment the advice threatens who you believe you are, even in the smallest way, your brain responds as if you're being attacked and it goes into protection mode. This is why you can agree with advice intellectually and still feel tightness, defensiveness, resistance, shutdown, confusion. Your brain is not rejecting the wisdom, it's rejecting the identity threat. And once the brain is in protection mode, something inevitable happens next, aka the reflexive pushback. Don't tell me what to do. So back in 1966, psychologist Jack Brem identified something called psychological reactance. And this truly explains half of human behavior. So reactance is the instinctive pushback that happens when you feel your autonomy being threatened. You could be told to do something you already want to do and still feel resistance. And have you ever noticed how someone can tell you advice that you already agree with and suddenly you don't want to do it anymore? That's reactance. Your brain isn't resisting the advice, it's resisting the feeling of losing control. And the fascinating thing is, this happens even when you ask for the advice, even when you ask for it, because humans will protect their autonomy at all costs, even at the expense of their progress. And then, of course, the story doesn't end here, because even if you bypass defensiveness, something deeper still blocks you. Because advice doesn't work until it feels like your idea. This is the IKEA effect, which was discovered by Dan Ariely and his team at Harvard and MIT. And this showed that humans place far more value on things that they build themselves. And so, what they did in this study, participants actually created origami figures or assembled IKEA furniture. And they valued their creation significantly higher than identical versions made by experts. So, what does this mean in terms of advice? It means if you don't build the insight, your brain doesn't value it. You can hear the same advice dozens of times and nothing happens. Then, one random morning in the shower, you think the exact same thing and it hits like a complete and utter revelation. It's not new information. It was just newly owned because your brain follows through on what it feels like it created, not what someone handed to you. And this is where most advice dies, not because you don't believe it, but because you don't own it yet. But even once you do own it intellectually, there is another barrier that shows up. You're not confused, you're overloaded. So this has to actually do with your working memory, aka your brain's mental workspace. And science shows that it can only hold about 3 to 5 meaningful pieces of information at once. And this actually comes from classic research by Baddeley and Hitch. And this was actually solidified by Nelson Cohen's later work. But when you receive advice, you're not just holding that advice, you're actually holding your fears, your patterns, the consequences, your relationships, your beliefs, your doubts, your hopes, your identity, your shame, your what ifs. So your working memory is drowning. So what happens? Your brain defaults to the safest, most familiar behavior, not because you're confused, but because you're overloaded. But even that's not the deepest layer, because sometimes you do understand the advice and you still can't take it. Why? Because your brain hates updating its beliefs. And this is actually a study out of University College London and they actually found something completely wild. People update their beliefs easily when the new information is positive. But when the new information is challenging, uncomfortable, or requires identity change, the brain resists updating, even when the information is true. And this completely explains so much, right? Because you can tell someone you deserve better, you're settling, you're capable of more, and they might agree, but their internal belief system has not caught up yet. Your brain is wired to protect old beliefs because old beliefs are predictable. New beliefs require emotional risk. And that risk is what brings us to the final layer of resistance. Advice exposes the gap between who you are and who you want to be. And this is the self-discrepancy theory by Higgins in 1987. And this showed that humans feel emotional pain, shame, guilt, avoidance when forced to confront the gap between their actual self and their ideal self. Advice shines a big ol' spotlight on that gap. It doesn't just tell you what to do. It tells you what you're not doing, and that gap hurts. Advice doesn't fail because it's wrong. Advice fails because it activates emotional self-protection. Every part of your brain and identity is trying to shield you from shame. So you shut down, you avoid, you rationalize, you stay exactly where you are. Not because you want to, but because your entire system is screaming, don't go towards the discomfort. So the question becomes, how do you ever take advice? How do you move forward when every part of your biology is trying to keep you exactly where you are? Because this is the part that matters most, and it has nothing to do with discipline. So here's how to actually take advice the real way change happens. Because the key is not to force the advice. The key is to create the internal conditions where your brain no longer sees the advice as a threat. And here's how this actually happens organically, not through willpower. You have to make the advice safe for your identity. You have to ask, what version of me could do this easily? Not how do I force this action? Because your nervous system will reject force every single time. You have to become the identity that finds the advice obvious. Identity precedes behavior. You also have to restore autonomy before you act, because reactance disappears when you reclaim choice. You need to ask yourself, what do I want here? Independent of what anyone said. When the action feels chosen, you stop resisting it. You have to convert the advice into your insight. This is how you hack the IKEA effect. You need to ask, what's my version of this? What part of this feels true for me? What would I say? Because internal authorship creates immediate commitment. And then you can shrink the advice into a micro identity step, not start loving yourself, but today I will do one thing that a loving version of me would do. Not leave them, but I'm going to tell myself one truth that I've been avoiding today. Not launch the business, but I'm becoming someone who explores possibilities. You match the step to the bandwidth of your current identity. And then you have to let your body answer before your mind. Because your intuition lives in your nervous system, not your thoughts. Ask yourself, when I imagine doing this, does my body contract or expand? Expansion equals alignment. Contraction equals not yet safe. That doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means it's not safe to you yet. This is how you stop forcing yourself into advice that your body isn't ready for. You can absolutely grow and change and become that version that does find it safe. But you have to take those other steps first. So, you don't ignore good advice because you're flawed. You ignore it because your brain is trying to truly protect your identity, preserve your autonomy, avoid overload, stabilize beliefs, defend old patterns, minimize emotional pain. Your brain is not the enemy that we think it is. It's truly doing its job. But once you understand the machinery, once you learn to change identity, restore autonomy, claim ownership, and reduce threat, advice stops feeling like pressure and starts feeling like clarity. And clarity becomes action, and action becomes change, and change becomes identity. That's how you finally follow the advice that you've known all along. So you know what to do. Go do it already. If you love this episode, follow Do It Already wherever you listen. Drop a quick review and share it with somebody who's been stuck in their head for way too long. And if you want more mindset resets, behind the scenes, or just a quick kick in the ass when you need it, come hang with me on TikTok and Instagram at Do It Already Podcast.
I'm important. I'm funny. I'm brave.